After 90 minutes of some relatively uninspiring association football, the U.S. men's national team has completed their mission. They have done their job. The U.S. has taken all 3 points from all 3 games of the group stage, but did not exactly do it in style. And in this last game against Canada, the U.S. trotted out a really interesting formation with an interesting system, and a lot of interesting things happened. Let's put it like that. It wasn't the most inspiring performance. There's still a lot of questions on this team. It seems like with each game, we seem to get more questions than answers, and I think it's going to be like that throughout the tournament. We'll get into why that is, and we'll get into what I think is going to happen with the remainder of this tournament on this edition of the Yank Report. What's up? My name is Sam. Welcome to the Yank Report, the show where we talk about the U.S. men's national team, and right now, we are neck deep in Gold Cup content. If that interests you, if you're into U.S. soccer and you're not yet subscribed, please consider hitting that subscribe button so you can follow along. Thank you guys for supporting the channel. The best way to support the channel is to hit the like button. It is free, it is easy to do. And before we get into the breakdown, let me thank the sponsor for today's video, and that is OneFootball. OneFootball is the free app that gives you the latest news and information about your favorite teams, players, and leagues. If you are interested in the Gold Cup and you want to follow along, OneFootball is a perfect companion for the Gold Cup. You can click on the game against Canada and the USA, for instance. You can get all the stats, you can get the lineups, you can get the timeline. It'll show you the fan voted player of the game and everything else you could possibly want to know. And if any players caught your eye, you can actually follow them directly in the app. And anytime any news breaks about that player, if they have a game, if they have transfer news, whatever, you'll get a push notification directly into your phone, which makes tracking Yanks Abroad super easy. To download the OneFootball app for free, you can click the link in the description. By clicking that link, you will not only be getting the latest news and information about your favorite teams and players, but you'll also be supporting the Yank Report directly and supporting a company that supports content creators that talk about U.S. soccer. So thank you to OneFootball for supporting content creators like me, and thank you to Liam, who downloaded the OneFootball app and said that it's been great and he's been loving it. So shout out to Liam. So the U.S. came out in, I don't know, let's call it a 5-2-1-2 with Matt Turner in goal, Shaq Moore as the right back, Walker Zimmerman, James Sands, and Miles Robinson as the center back, Sam Vines as the left back, Kellen Acosta and Gianluca Busio in the middle, with Sebastian Lletget playing kind of ahead of them, sort of, and Giassi Zardes and Daryl Dike up top. Now, of course, that was only on defense. On offense, with James Sands sneaking up from the center back role to kind of play in the 6, and then Sebastian Lletget would sort of kind of play in space, and he'd find himself on the left flank a lot, and it was a very interesting formation that was very moving and caused Canada some problems for the first 20 minutes or so before the wheels fell off the train. Did I say wheels? I think it's wheels fell off the track. I don't think trains anyway. So let's get into the highlights, and the biggest highlight of the game came in the very first minute. Off the opening kickoff, James Sands sends a ball upfield to Vines, who heads it up to DK. Eventually, Busio gets that ball in the left channel in midfield, and he swings it over to Acosta. Acosta takes on a man, beats his man, then he's tackled, but immediately collects the loose ball and plays it out to Lletget. Lletget plays it back across the middle to Moore, crashing the far post, 1-0 USA. It was a really nice ball in from Kellen Acosta and a really nice ball across from Sebastian Lletget. And that concludes the Kellen Acosta highlights from this game, because after that, I don't recall him being involved at all. That was the first and last time that I wrote his name down. In the 9th minute, things really start to fall apart for the U.S. A long ball in the channel puts Zimmerman in a one-on-one with Larea. The two tangle, but both end up going down in the box. Zimmerman ends up landing on the ball, and he goes down holding his knee. It is a penalty shot for Canada, but the ref ends up kind of waving it off. The ref ended up waving a lot of things in this game. The Mexican official from the Mexican Federation. Just if I was a Canadian fan after this game, I would not be happy with that particular ref. On the flip side, I saw some Americans saying that this ref should ref all the U.S.'s games from here on out. So it was definitely one of those games for the U.S. But Zimmerman goes off the field and in some obvious pain. We aren't sure if he's going to come back in, but eventually in the 14th minute, Donovan Pines does sub in for Zimmerman. Zimmerman has been one of the U.S.'s best players throughout this tournament, and when Zimmerman left the field, you could tell that the quality on the U.S. side started to slip. Donovan Pines is just not up to that standard that Walker Zimmerman is at. Walker Zimmerman, I think he's the MLS Defender of the Year. Donovan Pines is not. And some of that zip and confidence and distribution that we saw from the U.S. whenever Zimmerman was in the game just almost immediately fell apart. And whenever I say immediately, I mean immediately. In the 15th minute, just a minute after Pines comes on, a Busio back pass between Sands and Pines create some confusion as both assume that the other is going to go for it. Sands eventually has to make a really great tackle on Akinola. He wins the ball cleanly, but the tackle does end up injuring Akinola. Akinola goes down and eventually has to leave the game. In the 18th minute, the U.S. enjoys a nice spell of possession. Vines ends up with the ball attacking the left flank. Vines plays outside to Leggett, who has drifted into the left wing space. Remember how I said Leggett was playing in the middle, but in the attack, he would kind of drift out wide to the left and kind of catch Canada off guard, at least in the early part of the game. Eventually, they kind of caught onto that and shut that down. But in the early part, it was working really well. Leggett ended up playing it into the overlapping Vines. Vines puts a cross into the middle to Zardes, making a near post run. Zardes' flick header goes wide, but it was a nice moment from Vines. And I will say this, I've been pretty critical of Vines on this channel. I said after my last video that I did not know who should start at left back between Vines and Bello because neither have really impressed me. I have been concerned about Vines' defense and some of his attack throughout watching him play not only in this tournament but also in the Olympic qualifying tournament. But I'd say this was Sam Vines' best game in a U.S. shirt. He was a standout both defensively, especially late in the game whenever the U.S. was really up against it, and he created a lot with his dangerous crosses and just being an option on that left flank. You remember how I said earlier that Akinola had gone down with an injury and he would come off? Well, it wasn't until the 24th minute that he finally does come off and he is replaced by Osorio. This is significant for multiple reasons. One, because Canada's losing their starting striker, but also because Osorio comes on as more of an attacking midfielder as opposed to a striker. So Canada ended up changing shape. And it was around this time when Canada changed shape that Canada started to find more freedom in the attacking third and to start putting more pressure on the U.S. In the 29th minute, one of the most exciting moments of the game, a loose Canada back pass puts Daryl Dike in a sprint race with a Canadian defender. A well-timed slide tackle wins the ball for Canada, but boy oh boy, Daryl Dike running full speed in open field is a terrifying thing. One of my favorite tweets from the game was from Sanjeev of USMNT videos. He said something like, whenever if he were to see Daryl Dike running in an open field at him like that, he would make a business decision. These athletes are different people. In the 36th minute, Canada has one of their first big chances. Sam Vines gets tripped up attempting to dribble out of pressure. Canada gets the ball and immediately counters. Osorio puts it centrally to Larin, who immediately plays it out to Buchanan, who is in the U.S. box. Buchanan taps into the path of an oncoming Osorio, whose shot is blocked by an outstretched James Sands. Now, Buchanan was just a force of nature throughout this game. He was probably Canada's best attacker. And as I said before, with Osorio, instead of being a striker, being a little bit more withdrawn, it seemed to really open things up for Kyle Larin up top. He seemed to get more chances, and Canada's offense altogether just was able to retain possession better, was able to counterattack better, all that because of a forced substitution due to injury. In the 46th minute, Canada gets one of their best chances of the game right before half. After a long sustained spell of Canadian possession, Buchanan finishes off a mazy run at the U.S. back line by leaving it off for Hoylett. Hoylett at the top of the 18 attacks the box and plays a cross that finds its way to the back post. Sam Vines luckily intervenes to deny an oncoming Johnston. One of the Sam Vines' big defensive stops of the game was not his only defensive stop. Sam Vines came up big numerous times for the U.S. in this match. That brought us into halftime. Heading into halftime, the U.S. was pretty sloppy, but it was nothing like the sloppiness that we saw once they came out from the break. Almost immediately in the 46th minute, a terrible back pass from Pines gives Larin a shot on Turner. Turner saves the shot. It was not a great shot from Larin. You would think that a striker of his quality would do a little bit better with that in that situation, but Turner was there to save it. Turner, the great shot stopper that he is, was able to save everything in this game pretty comfortably, but not a great moment from Pines. In the 52nd minute, Canada is forced to make another substitution as Kyle Larin is injured and Cavallini has to come on. Now, at this point, Canada has lost both their two starting strikers due to injury, and Canada is not as deep a roster as some other nations out there. So as Larin goes out and as Akinola goes out, their quality starts to dip, and they're not able to take advantage of some of the great positions that they put themselves in later in this game. Right about that time, the U.S. do make their first substitution, and it is Reggie Cannon on for Shaq Moore. Now, this is not the midfield substitution that a lot of people were calling for, myself included. This was likely a planned substitution, planned before the match. As Stu Holden pointed out during the broadcast, Shaq Moore is still in preseason mode. He's been having to log a ton of minutes in this tournament due to Reggie Cannon's injury. So giving Shaq Moore that break, bringing Reggie Cannon on was a good thing. And ultimately, Reggie Cannon played well. And for a U.S. back line that was really struggling following the injury to Zimmerman, Cannon kind of came in and was a stabilizing force. That being said, one of the major criticisms of Greg Berhalter throughout his U.S. men's national team tenure has been his really late substitutions and his really late in-game adjustments. And this game was no different. I mean, people were calling for major substitutions within the 60th minute. It was clear that the U.S. midfield was getting overrun. It was clear that having only two midfielders for the majority of this game in the attack was just not working out. Greg did not make substitutions ultimately until well later in the game, and by that time, those substitutions that he made just did not seem to really make much of an effect on the game at all. So Greg Berhalter's inability to make quick in-game adjustments, or at least noticeable in-game adjustments, continues to be an ongoing thread of conversation, we'll call it that, for U.S. men's national team fans. In the 65th minute, the U.S. create one of their nicer moments in the second half, which is not saying much. The bar was not very high. Sam Vines pushes up the left flank to Zardes. Zardes charges upfield and plays in an overlapping Vines. Once again, a lot of the good things for the U.S. came through Sam Vines in the attack. He was all over the place today. Vines crosses into the box. DK dummies the cross at the near post. Acosta attacks the ball, but it's out of his reach. The ball falls to an oncoming Reggie Cannon. Cannon lines up the ball, but his strike is a complete slice. Remember, Reggie Cannon is still in preseason. He has not had a lot of opportunities on the ball because of his injury. And it really showed in this play. The ball rolled right to him, and he just whiffed it. His slice goes directly to Busio. The Busio rebound wrong foots the keeper, but ends up falling harmlessly out of bounds. Right after that, in the 73rd minute, the U.S. made that substitution that has long been awaited. Yule, Rodon, and Hoppe come on. Acosta, Zardes, and Busio go off. So the U.S. finally gets some reinforcements in the form of substitutions, but really it's too little too late, and the U.S. is just really holding down for the last 15 minutes, just trying to hold on for that 1-0 result. In the 79th minute, Buchanan gets another really nice opportunity. Operating on that left side of the Canadian attack in the channel. He makes a move inside on Roldan in the box and unleashes a curler to the back post. The shot beats Turner, but it also beats the post. It's just out wide, but one of Canada's more dangerous shots on goal throughout the game. In the 80th minute, more bad news for the U.S. DK goes shoulder to shoulder with a Canadian defender, ends up getting a finger in the eye, it looked like, and he falls to the ground. He falls to the ground awkwardly and injures his shoulder. He probably would have left the game at that point, but the U.S. were out of subs, so he was forced to just kind of hobble around on a gimp shoulder. Not a good thing for the U.S. moving forward. In the 81st minute, Matthew Hoppe makes a nice run and draws a foul. Matthew Hoppe was kind of a bright spark coming off the bench, but the U.S. just didn't have enough surrounding him in the attack for him to be really effective. In the 87th minute, more bad news for the U.S. James Sands goes down with what looks like cramps. He's able to come back on the field, but he kind of just hobbles around for the rest of the game. And that's it for significant moments in the game. My top players for this game were Robinson, Vines, and Sands. I thought Sands had another really good game. I thought Robinson, probably his best game of the tournament, and Vines his best game as a U.S. men's national team player. Now, for the U.S., or actually the story of this game and the story of this tournament so far has really been injuries, man. We saw Canada suffer a few different injuries throughout this game. They've already suffered a major injury in Alphonso Davies at the beginning of this tournament. The U.S. at the same time, we've already lost Areola, who we don't really know what's going on with Areola when he's going to return. We had Cannon out. He's come back, but in this game, Zimmerman goes down, really affects the U.S.'s ability to progress the ball, really affects the comfort level of that back line. It really starts, the quality of the whole team starts to go down whenever Zimmerman leaves. Pines comes in, and, before the tournament, Greg Berhalter said he was worried about that center back depth, and we saw it as soon as Zimmerman went down. One of the things I talked about in my interview with Straight Red Card is that if we're going to play three in the back, I really wish we would have brought an extra center back, but we didn't. So that means, Zimmerman goes down, and then at the end of this game, we see Sands goes down. He's got what I'm hoping was cramps, and I don't know what that means for him going forward throughout this tournament. Hopefully it's a mild injury and it's nothing to worry about going forward. But if he is injured, that means we're down to two center backs, which is not a good thing. We also had Daryl Dike going down with that shoulder injury. Once again, just happened, so I don't know what is going to become of that if he's out for any extended minutes. But if he is, boy, that's just another shot for an already beleaguered U.S. men's national team attack. One of the big debates coming into this tournament was whether it was better for our Euro-based players to stay with their clubs in preseason or come to this tournament and play there. And so far, with all the injuries I'm seeing, I think personally it was a good decision that a lot of those guys stayed over there, stayed in preseason, because boy, we're seeing a ton of injuries, not just with the U.S., but with a lot of teams in this tournament. I don't know why. I don't know what accounts for that. I know a lot of these players are in preseason, but some of them aren't. Some of them are MLS players in midseason form, yet they're still going down with injuries. One thing I'm seeing a lot of in this tournament on social media is kind of evaluating players game to game, and with each game saying, like, DK should be our starter for the senior team, and then after this game, DK's trash. He needs to work on his technique. He's not good enough. And I would say, pump the brakes on a lot of these players. A lot of these players are 19, 18, 20 years old, 21 years old. These are very young players. And one thing about young players, especially young players getting their first significant minutes with their national team, is that they're going to be inconsistent. They're not going to have great game to great game to great game. Even the best players in the world don't have great games over great games over great games. So I would anticipate that some of these guys are going to have good performances, not so good performances, great performances, not so good performances. It's just going to happen that way, because that's the age that they're at, and that's just what happens with young players. It's really unfortunate that we're having to rely on so many young players, but that's just kind of where we are in the U.S. right now. As for Gianluca Busio, I think a lot of what I said about Daryl Dike can apply to Busio. I see a lot of people down on Busio right now, saying that he was too hyped up and that, we have to wait on him. Well, of course we have to wait on him. He's 19 years old, guys. This is literally his third cap as a national team player. This is the second game he's ever started. This is the biggest national team game he's ever played in. This is the most competitive national team game he's ever played in. It's going to take some time. Some players like Gio Reyna, I would say even Gio Reyna in his first start for the national team was not as good as what I would consider like a standard Gio Reyna game. So anticipate that guys like Gianluca Busio are going to have good games and bad games, and it's just going to be all part of it. So it wasn't pretty, it wasn't exciting, but the U.S. was able to do the job. They got all 3 points from all 3 games in the group stage. They have won the group, and they are moving on to the next round. And if they continue to win, they will not have to face Mexico until the finals. Let me know what you thought in the comment section. Who were your top players? Who were your not top players? As always, if you speak Spanish, please leave your comment in Spanish so I can practice my Spanish. And thank you guys for supporting my Spanish learning, man. I've been learning Spanish for like a year and a half. I did Babbel, I did Duolingo. I'm reading a lot of books right now. I know some of you are giving me like tips and tricks. Others, somebody's giving me a word of the day. It's been so cool how supportive you guys are. Look, if you're not yet subscribed, please consider hitting that subscribe button. We got a ton more US soccer content coming your way. If you want to support the channel, the best way to do so is hit the like button. Thank you guys for watching. My name is Sam, and this is the Yank Report.